The rain was a steady, spiteful drumbeat against the windows of Bistro 88, a place that smelled of expensive roast coffee and the quiet desperation of people trying to prove something. I sat in a corner booth, my fingers wrapped around a cup of lukewarm chamomile tea, a pathetic flag of surrender in a war I was already losing. My name is Emma Hartley, and I was on a blind date that had been orchestrated by my well-meaning but perpetually optimistic best friend, Sarah. He's a CEO, Emma. Handsome, successful, a little mysterious. He's perfect for you, she chirped on the phone, conveniently ignoring the fact that a little mysterious in Sarah's world often translated to has a working internet connection and isn't a convicted felon. But this time she had outdone herself. His name, apparently, was Liam Prescott, a name that sounded like it belonged on a magazine cover, not in a text from a mutual friend. I had done my due diligence, which meant a frantic, sweaty-palmed social media stalk that revealed nothing. A ghost. A successful, wealthy, digital ghost. That should have been my first red flag. The second one was the chair opposite me. It was empty, for 23 excruciating minutes. 23 minutes of me trying not to stare at the door, of smoothing down the fabric of my admittedly beautiful, but perhaps a little too tight, emerald green dress, of trying to remember the breathing exercises my therapist had taught me. I'd chosen the dress because it was the color of hope, of renewal. It was the dress I'd bought for my sister's wedding, the one I'd told myself I'd wear when my life finally started to click into place. It was a lovely dress. It just had a lot of work to do. 23 minutes. I was just about to gather my things, to leave with as much dignity as a woman can muster when she's been publicly stood up in a place where a single macaron costs more than a week's worth of groceries when he walked in. And I'll be honest, my first thought wasn't, oh, thank God, or even, wow, he's handsome. It was, oh God, please let this man be waiting for someone else. Liam Prescott was, to put it mildly, devastating. He was tall, with the kind of broad shoulders that made a woman feel small and safe, or perhaps small and intimidated. He had the sharp, clean lines of a man who spent his life in boardrooms and on private jets, his dark suit tailored to perfection. His eyes were a startling shade of gray, like storm clouds over the ocean. He was a walking, breathing testament to the universe's profound sense of humor, throwing a man who looked like that at a woman who looked like me. He paused at the hostess stand, scanned the room, and his gaze landed on me. I saw the flicker, the microsecond of hesitation, the faint tightening of his jaw. It was a universal language I'd become fluent in. It was the oh, her. Look. The one that said, this can't be right. The picture was probably old, or filtered, or of a completely different person. He walked over, his shoes making a soft, expensive sound against the marble floor. I felt my insides turn to a cold, viscous sludge. My carefully practiced smile felt like a grimace glued to my face. Emma, his voice was deep, a resonant baritone that probably made subordinates tremble. It made me want to crawl under the table. Yes, I managed, my voice a squeak. You must be Liam. He didn't apologize for being late. He just gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod and sat down. The waiter materialized instantly, and Liam ordered a whiskey neat. I felt the familiar sting of being diminished. I was a footnote in his evening, a checkbox he needed to tick off before he could get to the real business of the day. So, he said, finally giving me his full attention, or what passed for it. His eyes traveled over me, not with the warmth of a man appraising a woman, but with the cold calculation of a man assessing a business proposition that had turned out to be a lemon. Sarah tells me you're a graphic designer. I am, I said, finding a sliver of my voice. I work for myself, freelance, mostly for social media campaigns and branding. Freelance, he repeated, the word tasting like ashes in his mouth. He didn't say it, but I could hear the unspoken, and you're not even good enough to have a real job. He took a sip of his whiskey. Is this how you spend your days, waiting for people to give you work? This wasn't a date. This was an audit. He was auditing my life, my career, my appearance, and finding every single line item lacking. The economy is dynamic, I said, the words coming out hollow. It allows for a lot of flexibility. Flexibility, he said, a ghost of a smirk on his lips. It was the first real expression I'd seen on his face, and it was one of contempt. That's a very diplomatic word for it. He set his glass down with a sharp clink. Listen, Emma, I'm a busy man. Sarah said you were. Interesting. She said you had a certain joie de vivre which, quite frankly, I'm not seeing. She also said you were a size 6. The world stopped. The rain outside seemed to freeze mid-drop. The murmur of the cafe faded into a dull, distant roar. I stared at him, my brain refusing to process what I had just heard. It was the most brutal, blunt, and heartless thing anyone had ever said to me. What? I breathed, my throat tight. He leaned forward, his gray eyes cold. I don't have time for games. I'm a very visual person, Emma. A CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. I have an image to maintain. When I go to a gala, I need a woman on my arm who doesn't look like she's about to break the chair she's sitting on. Sarah was supposed to vet you. She didn't. This is an embarrassment. Tears pricked at the back of my eyes, hot and humiliating. I had been rejected before. I'd been ghosted, slow-faded, and friend-zoned. But I had never in my entire life been so thoroughly and professionally dissected. He wasn't just rejecting me. He was filing a formal complaint against my very existence. What did you just say to me? I asked, my voice trembling, a low, dangerous tremor I didn't recognize. He sighed, the sound of profound theatrical irritation. I think you heard me. This is a waste of my time, it's a waste of yours. Let's not pretend this is going anywhere. You're a very large woman, Emma. No one marries a fat girl. They might have a fling with them, a secret little tryst in a cheap hotel when they're feeling base, but they don't marry them. The world doesn't work that way. We are a reflection of our partners. You, I'm afraid, would be a very poor reflection on me. The words hung in the air between us, ugly and sharp. I saw a flicker of something in his eyes just for a second. Satisfaction. He enjoyed it. He enjoyed the power, the ability to crush someone with his words. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud, dramatic break. It was a quiet, clean fracture like a bone snapping under immense pressure. The fear, the self-loathing, the desperate need for approval, it all just evaporated. In its place, a steely, cold fury rose up, one I didn't even know I possessed. No one marries a fat girl, I repeated slowly, testing the words on my tongue. They tasted like poison, but a poison I had just developed an immunity to. That's right, he said, leaning back in his chair, a smug look on his face. So you see my point. I leaned forward, mirroring his posture. This time I didn't feel small. I felt powerful. I felt like I was holding a grenade with the pin pulled. I see your point, I said, my voice now eerily calm. You're right, you're a very visual person. You have an image to maintain. And you are correct. I am not a size 6. I am a size 16. I have curves and thighs that can crush a watermelon and an ass that has its own gravitational pull. It has its own weather system. He blinked, taken aback by my sudden, crude confidence. I gave him a slow, predatory smile. But you, Liam, I continued, my voice dropping to a low, venomous whisper, you are an ass. A small, insecure, pathetic excuse for a human being who gets his tiny, withered thrills from diminishing other people. That's what you are. A tiny little man with a big bank account and a heart the size of a raisin. I saw a flush creep up his neck. I had hit a nerve. How dare you? Let me finish, I interrupted, my voice hard as steel. You said no one marries a fat girl. Okay, fine, let's take that. I accept your premise. But let's flip it. What kind of woman would ever marry a man like you? A man who is so fragile, so utterly dependent on the external validation of strangers, that he can't even enjoy a cup of coffee with a woman who isn't a size 6. A man who treats other human beings like they are fucking accessories. I stood up, my legs feeling surprisingly steady. I looked down at him. For a second I saw him for what he was. A scared little boy in an expensive suit. A man who has to use a woman's weight to feel powerful is a man who is terrified of his own mediocrity, I said, my voice ringing in the quiet cafe. A few people were staring, their forks frozen halfway to their mouths. He's a man who knows, deep down, that without his money, his car, his silly little title, he has absolutely nothing to offer. He's a void. He opened his mouth to speak, but I held up a hand, silencing him. It was a gesture of pure, unadulterated power, and it felt glorious. So you're right, Liam. No one is going to marry a fat girl. But you know what? No woman with a single ounce of self-respect is going to want to marry a monster either. So here's my proposition. Let's prove them all wrong. He stared at me, utterly baffled. What are you talking about? I'm talking about a one-year project, I said, a brilliant, crazy idea blooming in my mind. You, Liam Prescott, CEO of your silly little empire, are going to date me. Publicly, romantically, passionately. For 1 year, you are going to be my devoted, loving, and publicly affectionate boyfriend. The absurdity of it made him sputter. Why the hell would I ever agree to that? Because I said you're a void, I repeated. And I think, somewhere deep down, you know it's true. I'm giving you a chance. A chance to prove to the world and to yourself that you are more than just a surface. That you are a man who is not controlled by the whims of society. That you can be with a woman who challenges you, who is your equal in every way that matters, and who happens to have a little more cushion for the pushing. I don't have to prove anything, he scoffed, but his voice had lost its edge. The confidence was wavering. Oh, but you do, I insisted, leaning in close. To me. You insulted me, Liam. You belittled me. You reduced me to a number on a scale. I am going to be your greatest professional triumph. By the end of this year, I won't just change the way you see me. I am going to change the way you see the entire goddamn world. And I'm going to do it while wearing a size 16 dress. He stared at me, and for the first time, I saw something other than contempt in his eyes. I saw confusion. I saw a flicker of curiosity. I saw a man who had been presented with a puzzle he couldn't immediately solve, and it was driving him crazy. 1 year, he finally said, his voice a low murmur. What do you get out of it? I get a platform, I said, the plan solidifying as I spoke. I get access. I get to show the world what it looks like when a woman who is comfortable in her own skin is at the top of her game. I get to use your resources, your name, your network, to build my own brand and make my own mark. And if nothing else, I added with a wicked grin, I get the absolute pleasure of making you pay for your dinner and for the therapy I'm going to need after this conversation. He was silent for a long moment. He was calculating. I could practically see the gears turning in his head. He was a businessman, and this was a business proposition. One that was risky, unpredictable, and completely outside his comfort zone. It was the kind of proposition that could either make him or break him. 1 year, he repeated, slower this time. You are going to be my girlfriend for 1 year, publicly. 1 year, I confirmed. But you have to do it right. You have to be convincing. You have to be a man who is proud to be with me. No half measures, no awkwardness. You are going to be genuinely, madly, head over heels in love with me. Can you fake that, Liam? Can you fake real affection? He took a deep breath and let it out slowly. He looked at me, really looked at me. For a split second, the mask of the arrogant CEO slipped, and I saw the man underneath. The man who was terrified of being alone, of being seen as a failure, of being nothing more than the sum of his possessions. I can fake anything, he said, a hint of his old arrogance returning, but it was quieter now, less certain. It's what I do. It's a deal then, I said, holding out my hand. He stared at it for a moment before taking it. His hand was warm and surprisingly soft. I squeezed it, a gesture of power, not of intimacy. 1 year, I said, my voice firm. Let's prove them all wrong. He didn't look convinced. He looked like a man who had just made a deal with the devil, and I was the devil in an emerald green dress. He signaled the waiter for the check, not saying another word. I watched him, a strange cocktail of triumph, fear, and sheer, unadulterated adrenaline coursing through my veins. I had just gone from being a victim to being a participant in my own life. I had just turned a blind date into a war council. I had no idea what the next year would bring. I had no idea if I could pull it off. But as I gathered my purse and walked out of Bistro 88, the rain hitting my face felt less like a punishment and more like a baptism. The first few weeks were surreal. I expected Liam to back out, to call the whole thing off as a moment of temporary insanity. But he didn't. He was a man of his word, even if it was a word given under duress. The rules of our arrangement were simple, established in a series of cold, businesslike emails. First, the public persona. Liam Prescott was to be my besotted boyfriend. This meant dates in public places, hand-holding, whispering in ears, and generally looking like a man who couldn't believe his luck. He was allowed to set the schedule for these public appearances, but I had veto power. Second, the private reality. There was to be no real intimacy. No private dinners, no overnight stays, no ambiguous texts. We were business partners playing a role. We would meet, discuss our plans over coffee in his sterile, glass-walled office, and go our separate ways. Third, the payoff. I got access to his world. I would attend events as his plus one, giving me invaluable networking opportunities to expand my own business. The first of these events was a charity gala for the city's art museum, a black tie affair that I was dreading. I chose my dress carefully, not the green one that was for standing up to a bully. This was for entering the lion's den. I chose a stunning, custom-made gown in a deep midnight blue silk and velvet, with a low back and a full skirt that swirled around my ankles like a galaxy. My hair was done in waves. My makeup was flawless. I looked like a woman who belonged on a red carpet, not a woman who was waiting for the floor to swallow her whole. Liam picked me up. His eyes widened for a split second when he saw me, a crack in his carefully constructed armor. He recovered quickly, offering his arm with a stiff, formal air. "You look acceptable," he said. It was the most begrudging compliment I'd ever heard. I patted his arm. "And you look like you're about to have a root canal. Try to smile, darling. This is supposed to be fun." The gala was a glittering waterfall of champagne, diamonds, and the hollow, musical sound of powerful people congratulating themselves. Liam was immediately swarmed by people. Bored housewives, ambitious executives, and a gaggle of glamorous, skeletal women who looked at me the way a hawk looks at a field mouse. But Liam surprised me. He put his hand on the small of my back, a proprietary, possessive gesture that felt shockingly real. He leaned in and whispered, "Smile, darling. You said it yourself. This is supposed to be fun." He was playing his part perfectly. He introduced me to everyone, his voice dropping to a tone of adoring pride. "This is Emma, my girlfriend. She's a brilliant graphic designer. She's currently rebranding the entire digital presence of my company." I nearly choked on my champagne. It was a lie, a complete and utter fabrication. We had never discussed this, but I recovered quickly, giving the group of suits a dazzling smile. "He's being modest. It's really a massive project. He's had to hire an entire team just to support me." I added a playful wink, and I saw the women's faces soften, their suspicion replaced by a reluctant curiosity. It was a game. We were good at it. We were so good, in fact, that sometimes I forgot we were playing. He would lean in close to murmur a cutting remark about the man he was talking to, and his breath would tickle my ear, sending an unwelcome shiver down my spine. I would laugh at one of his jokes, a genuine, full-bellied laugh, and I'd see him smile, a real smile, not the manufactured one he wore for the cameras. As the weeks turned into months, the game became more intricate. We had our first public date at a trendy rooftop bar overlooking the city skyline. He arrived late again, but this time he had an excuse, a board meeting that ran over. He ordered for both of us, a gesture that would have annoyed me immensely if it hadn't been so oddly charming. He remembered I liked my steak medium rare, a detail I hadn't told him. He must have done his research. The conversation flowed more easily than I expected. We talked about everything except our arrangement, about art, about travel, about the absurdity of modern dating. I found myself laughing at his dry wit, and I saw him relax, his shoulders dropping from their usual rigid posture. A photographer from a society magazine snapped our picture, and the next day it was all over social media. Tech CEO Liam Prescott spotted with mystery woman, the caption read. Is this the new love interest? The comments were vicious. She's too big for him. What a downgrade from his ex. He must be desperate. I tried not to read them, but I couldn't help myself. I felt the familiar sting of inadequacy, but then I remembered the deal. I was proving them all wrong, or at least I was trying to. Liam called me that night, his voice tight with barely contained rage. I saw the comments, he said. I'm sorry, I didn't think they'd be so cruel. I heard something in his voice I hadn't heard before, empathy. It's fine, I said, trying to sound nonchalant. I'm used to it. You shouldn't have to be, he said, and the words hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken meaning. The call ended awkwardly, but something had shifted. He was starting to see me, not as a prop in his elaborate game, but as a person. The next month his company was launching a new product. It was a revolutionary piece of tech, a smart home device that was supposed to change the way people lived. But a week before the launch, disaster struck. A rival company had managed to hack into his system and leak a false prototype online. The images were everywhere, mocked and ridiculed. The stock price plummeted. Liam was a wreck. He called me to his office, his usually impeccable appearance disheveled, his eyes bloodshot. I don't know what to do, he admitted, slumping into his chair. Everything I've worked for, it's all falling apart. I looked at the leaked images on his screen. They were amateurish, poorly photoshopped, but the damage was done. We need to fight back, I said, a plan forming in my mind. We need to show them what the real product looks like. Something so beautiful, so innovative that they'll forget the fake. He looked at me, a flicker of hope in his eyes. You can do that. I can do that, I said, my voice confident. The next week was a blur of sleepless nights and caffeine-fueled creativity. I worked in his office, taking over a massive whiteboard, sketching, designing, redesigning. Liam hovered, offering suggestions, but mostly just watching me with a growing sense of awe. I created a series of sleek, minimalist visuals that captured the true essence of his product. They were bold, elegant, and utterly breathtaking. The campaign launched under the hashtag #TheRealVision. The response was immediate and explosive. The visuals were shared millions of times, the critics were silenced, the stock price recovered and then soared. Liam was hailed as a visionary. He called me into his office the day after, his face radiant with relief and something else, something I couldn't quite identify. You did it, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You saved me. He pulled me into a hug, a spontaneous, unprompted embrace. I felt the warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart against my chest. It was a moment of pure, unscripted intimacy, and it terrified me. Things changed after that. The boundaries of our arrangement blurred. He started texting me, not about logistics, but about his day, about a funny thing his assistant did, about a song he heard on the radio. He started showing up at my apartment with takeout, insisting we eat together. He told me about his childhood, about his father who was never there, about his mother who died when he was young. He told me about the pressure, the constant, crushing pressure to be perfect, to be successful, to be worthy of the name he carried. And I listened. I listened to the man behind the mask, the scared little boy who had built a fortress of wealth and power to protect himself from the world. I started to see him differently. The arrogance was still there, but it was tempered by vulnerability, by a desperate need for approval that mirrored my own. We were both broken, we were both pretending, and somehow we were starting to find a strange, imperfect solace in each other. The first kiss happened on a rainy Tuesday night. We were in his penthouse, going over the final details for a charity event we were hosting together. The rain was pelting against the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights blurring into a kaleidoscope of color. The tension between us had been building for weeks, a charged current that hummed in the air whenever we were alone. He was showing me a design mock-up on his tablet, his shoulder brushing against mine. I looked up at him and he was looking at me, his gray eyes dark and intense. I saw the question in them, the hesitation, the fear. And then he leaned in, his lips brushing against mine. It was a soft, tentative kiss, a question more than a statement. I kissed him back and the world fell away. The game, the deal, the pretense, it all melted into the background. There was only the warmth of his lips, the taste of coffee and something sweet, the feel of his hand cupping my face. It was real. It was terrifyingly, breathtakingly real. The charity event was a massive success. We walked the red carpet together, hand in hand, our smiles genuine. The cameras flashed, the reporters shouted questions, and I felt a surge of confidence I had never known. I was no longer the fat girl on a blind date. I was Emma Hartley, graphic designer, businesswoman, and the girlfriend of one of the most eligible bachelors in the city. But more than that, I was a woman who had taken control of her own narrative, who had refused to be defined by the cruel words of a stranger. I had turned an insult into an opportunity, a rejection into a revolution. And standing there under the bright lights with Liam's hand holding mine, I realized that the victory was no longer about proving them wrong. It was about proving myself right. It was about believing that I was worthy of love, of success, of happiness, regardless of my size. It was about understanding that the world was full of small-minded people who would try to tear me down, but that I had the power to rise above them. But the universe has a sick sense of humor, and it wasn't done with us yet. The morning after the charity event, a tabloid published a story. Liam Prescott's new love, a fake, the headline screamed. Sources reveal that the couple's romance is a carefully orchestrated PR stunt to boost Prescott's image after the tech disaster. The article was detailed, citing anonymous sources close to Liam, claiming that the entire relationship was a business arrangement. My phone exploded with calls and texts. Sarah was frantic. My mother was crying. I felt the world collapsing around me. I called Liam, my voice shaking. "Did you see the article?" I asked. "I did," he said, his voice cold, distant. "We need to talk." He came over to my apartment that evening, his face a mask of stone. "This is your fault," he said, his words like shards of glass. "You were the one who wanted to prove everyone wrong. You were the one who turned this into a spectacle." I stared at him, stunned. "My fault?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You were the one who called me fat. You were the one who said no one would marry me. I didn't ask for this. I was just trying to survive." He shook his head, his jaw tight. "My board is furious. My investors are questioning my judgment. You have no idea what you've done." I felt the tears welling up in my eyes, hot and humiliating. "I saved your company, Liam. I saved your reputation. And this is how you repay me, by blaming me for something I didn't do." He looked away, his shoulders slumping. "I don't know what to do," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't know how to fix this." I wanted to scream at him, to tell him that he was just as weak and pathetic as the day I met him. But I looked at him, really looked at him, and I saw the fear in his eyes, the same fear I had seen in the cafe that first night. He wasn't just angry. He was terrified. He was terrified of losing everything, of being exposed as the fraud he secretly believed himself to be. "I need time," he said, not meeting my eyes. "I need to figure this out." He left without another word. I sat on my couch for hours, staring at the wall, the silence of my apartment deafening. I had won the battle. I had proven I could be seen, valued, appreciated. But I had lost the war. I had lost him. The man I had started to fall for, the man who had kissed me in the rain and made me feel like I was the most beautiful woman in the world, had turned out to be just another coward. The next few weeks were a blur of damage control. I released a statement, carefully worded, denying the rumors. I focused on my work, throwing myself into projects with a manic energy. But I couldn't stop thinking about him. I missed his laugh, his dry wit, the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't watching. I missed the man he had been, the man who had started to break free from his own prison. And then, out of the blue, he showed up at my doorstep. It was late, past midnight. He looked terrible, his eyes red-rimmed, his stubble unshaven. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice cracking. "I'm so sorry, Emma. I was a coward. I was so afraid of losing everything. I almost lost the only thing that actually mattered." I let him in, my heart pounding in my chest. He fell to his knees, taking my hands in his. "The article wasn't your fault," he said. "It was my ex-girlfriend. She was jealous. She sold the story to the tabloid. I had my lawyers investigate. I have proof. I'm going to sue her for defamation. I'll make her pay." I looked down at him, this proud, arrogant man, kneeling at my feet, and I felt a wave of overwhelming emotion. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Because I love you," he said, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "I love you, Emma. I've loved you since that night at the gala when you stood up to all those people and refused to be diminished. I love your strength, your courage, your stubborn refusal to give up. I love the way you laugh, the way you crinkle your nose when you're concentrating, the way you make me feel like I'm more than just the sum of my bank account." He took a deep breath. "I love you, and I don't care what anyone thinks. I don't care about the board or the investors or the tabloids. I just care about you." I knelt down in front of him, cupping his face in my hands. "I was so angry at you," I said, my voice thick with tears. "I thought you were just like all the others. I thought you had used me and discarded me." "Never," he said, his voice fierce. "I would never do that. You are the best thing that has ever happened to me, Emma. You showed me that I could be more than the monster I had become. You showed me that I was worthy of love." He leaned in and kissed me, and this time there was no hesitation, no fear. It was a kiss of surrender, of redemption, of two broken people finding each other in the wreckage of their own lives. A year ago, I was sitting in a cafe, being told I was unworthy of love because of my size. Today, I am standing in a garden, surrounded by wildflowers and fairy lights, looking into the eyes of the man who said no one would ever marry a fat girl. He is looking at me with a love so pure, so unconditional that I can hardly believe it's real. The officiant clears her throat. "Do you, Emma Hartley, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" I look at Liam, at the tears streaming down his face, at the smile that reaches his eyes, at the man who had the courage to change, to grow, to love. "I do," I say, my voice clear and strong. "And you, Liam Prescott, do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" He takes my hands, his grip warm and steady. "I do," he says, his voice thick with emotion. "I take this woman exactly as she is. I take her strength, her courage, her beautiful, incredible soul. I take her in all her glory, and I promise to love her, honor her, and cherish her for the rest of my life." He leans in and whispers, so only I can hear, "Let's prove them all wrong." And we both laugh, the sound of it mingling with the music and the tears and the joy of a love that defied all expectations. The wedding pictures went viral. They showed a beautiful woman in a flowing white gown, her curves hugged by delicate lace, her smile radiant. They showed a handsome man in a tailored suit, his eyes fixed on her as if she were the sun and he were the planets orbiting around her. The comments were different this time. They looked so happy. "Love doesn't have a size. This gives me hope." And my personal favorite, from a woman who had clearly been through her own battles: "No one marries a fat girl. Tell that to this queen who just landed a king." I read the comments with a smile, my heart full. I had proven them wrong. I had proven everyone wrong. But more importantly, I had proven myself right. I had proven that I was worthy of love, not in spite of who I was, but because of it. I had proven that the only person who gets to define my worth is me. Liam and I danced under the stars, his arms wrapped around me, his head resting against mine. "I can't believe you're my wife," he murmured, his voice filled with wonder. "I can't believe you're my husband," I replied, laughing. "You were such a jerk when we met." "I know," he said, his voice sheepish. "I was an idiot. I was so blinded by my own insecurities that I couldn't see the most incredible woman right in front of me." He pulled back, looking me in the eyes. "But you changed me, Emma. You made me want to be a better man, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you." "You already are," I said, kissing him softly. "You already are." The year that followed was a whirlwind of love and laughter. We traveled the world, from the beaches of Bali to the mountains of Switzerland. We built a life together, a home filled with warmth and joy. My graphic design business flourished, and I became a sought-after speaker, sharing my story of resilience and self-love with women all over the country. Liam's company, now under his careful guidance, became a beacon of diversity and inclusion, a testament to the power of change. We faced challenges, of course. There were arguments, there were misunderstandings, there were moments of doubt. But we faced them together, armed with the knowledge that our love was strong enough to weather any storm. And then one day I found out I was pregnant. I was terrified. The doctor had warned me that my weight might make the pregnancy complicated. I was afraid of failing, of proving all those people right who said I wasn't meant to be a mother. But Liam held my hand, his eyes steady and reassuring. "We're going to do this together," he said. "You and me. We're going to prove them all wrong, remember." And we did. The pregnancy was difficult. There were moments of fear and pain, but I was surrounded by love. Liam was by my side through every ultrasound, every doctor's appointment, every sleepless night. He held my hair back when I was sick. He rubbed my swollen feet. He told me I was beautiful even when I felt like a beached whale. And when our daughter was born, a perfect, healthy, screaming bundle of joy, he cried like a baby. "She has your strength," he whispered, looking at her with pure adoration. "She has your courage." And I knew in that moment that everything I had been through, every insult, every tear, every moment of self-doubt had all been worth it. It had all led me to this perfect moment, this perfect family. I look at my daughter now, a beautiful toddler with her father's gray eyes and my stubborn chin. She is fearless, confident, and full of joy. She doesn't know the word fat or ugly or unworthy. She knows only love, acceptance, and the unshakable belief that she can do anything she sets her mind to. I am determined to keep it that way. I will teach her that her worth is not defined by the number on a scale, but by the content of her character, the depth of her heart, the strength of her spirit. I will teach her that the world can be cruel, but that she has the power to rise above it. And I will teach her with every action, every word, every hug, that she is loved unconditionally and completely, just as I am loved, just as I have always deserved to be loved. Liam walks into the living room, our daughter in his arms. "Mommy," she shrieks, reaching out for me. I take her, burying my face in her soft hair. "What do you want for dinner?" Liam asks, his smile soft. "Something delicious," I say, "and something that doesn't make me feel guilty." He laughs, that deep, rumbling laugh that still makes my heart skip a beat. "Done, pizza it is." He kisses my forehead, then my daughter's. "You two are the best thing that ever happened to me." And I know in the deepest part of my soul that he means it. The rain is falling outside, a gentle, rhythmic sound against the windows. I think back to that night, all those years ago, sitting in that cafe, feeling small and insignificant. I remember the cruel words, the sting of rejection, the moment I decided to fight back. I remember the fear, the uncertainty, the sheer audacity of my plan. And I remember the moment I realized that I had won. Not because I had proven Liam wrong or the world wrong, but because I had proven myself right. I had proven that I was worthy of love, of happiness, of a life filled with joy. I had proven that the only person who gets to define my worth is me. And I had proven that love, real love, doesn't have a size. It doesn't have a number. It doesn't have a limit. It just is. I look at my husband, my daughter, my beautiful, messy, chaotic life, and I smile. "No one marries a fat girl," he had said, and I had replied, "Let's prove them all wrong." And we did. We proved them all wrong, and we're going to keep proving them wrong every single day for the rest of our lives, because that's what love does. It doesn't just change you, it sets you free.